Instructors, are you tired of students showing up unprepared? With Pilot Institute Online Ground School, they show up ready. No more unpaid ground lessons that run long. No more frustrated students blaming you for the slow progress. Instead, you get students who learn quickly, recommend you to friends, and also make your job easier. The result? You build flight hours faster, your students are going to succeed, and then also you get to focus on the flying. With a 99.9% pass rate and 33,000 five-star reviews, we are the ground school that instructors trust. Plus, it's completely free for CFIs. Get your free instructor account today at pilotinstitute.com/instructor.
Welcome to the 101st MentorLIVE, National Association of Flight Instructors monthly live broadcast. I'm Karen Kalashek, chair of NAFI, and your host for this evening's show. Before we begin, let's first of all give a unfortunate but appropriate in memoriam to someone who's one of our dear friends and has recently passed. So Ron is very well known in aviation circles, particularly in the area of flight instruction. He was the General Aviation Awards CFI of the Year. He was also recently inducted into the Aviation Instructors Hall of Fame. He passed last week along with his wife Barbara and his beloved A36 Bonanza. Ron, you may recall, if you've been watching MentorLIVE for a number of episodes, he has also hosted us in the past, hosted for you. So rest in peace, Ron and Barbara. Tonight's presentation for you is going to be on our next page. There we go. Beyond Procedures, Training Mental Performance in Aviation. You're going to hear by someone who is the perfect presenter for this topic, as you're going to hear, Tammy Barlette. She founded a cross-check mental performance training company. She's also a retired lieutenant colonel. So we're going to learn more about Tammy shortly and how confidence, focus, and performance are going to enhance not only your flight training, your flying as an aviator, but also the rest of your existence as well. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this evening, Pilot Institute. They have just amazing augmented and virtual reality products. If you haven't seen them at one of the air shows and you are in attendance, be sure and stop by. You will be just amazed at what they offer. And even from the comfort of your home, you can take advantage of looking at their VOR simulator, which is an excellent way to teach and on your own study for the gaining better knowledge of utilizing VORs. Okay, a bit of housekeeping before we begin Tammy's presentation. You are earning wings credit if you take the quiz following the presentation, answer the quiz questions, and earn your credit. You can also find more information about the presentation topic, also about our presenter herself, about me, and we welcome everyone to join NAFI. Remember, NAFI is for anyone who supports aviation safety. You do not have to be an aviation instructor. In fact, we have quite a number of student pilots who find our resources very beneficial to their education. And also, all of the prior 100 MentorLIVE broadcasts are archived. You can find that also on the same website with links to each one of those. It's a good time to binge watch, okay? And we'd also really appreciate your consideration to help support us. You'll see a link for also donating that will help provide this professionally produced broadcast in the future. This is a live presentation for those that are joining us this evening. So you are going to be able to join a chat room, ask questions, and at the end of the presentation, Tammy will be answering as many of those as possible. Okay, as I said, we are going to be hearing from Tammy Barlette, Beyond Procedures, Training Mental Performance in Aviation, something we don't tend to hear a lot or focus on, but it has huge implications for both your success and just the opposite. So you're going to learn from Tammy not only how important it is, but very good tools and techniques to enhance your performance. A little bit about Tammy herself. She is a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Air Force. As you can see, she has many, many hours and combat training, has flown a variety of military aircraft. She went to fighter weapons school, which is the Air Force equivalent of Top Gun. And she has, on her own, studied for years and years mental performance and then began her company. back in 2023. So she is the founder and CEO, and we'll be learning more about mental performance and how it benefits us. One thing I found interesting, speaking to Tammy, who is with us, of course, is now you'd think with someone with this background and all of that combat military training, obviously she looks extremely comfortable in that flight suit, so she must have some amazing hobby, right? Like, dog sledding across the Antarctic. Is that true, Tammy? What do you do for fun?
This is the first question. That's awesome. I am, just like everyone else out there, I drive my kids around everywhere in my minivan. Yeah, that's what my hobby is, and I love it.
Yeah, so as you're going to find out, she does have 3 children on top of all of this. So maybe that's what you meant by combat. Okay. Now, all the parents in the audience can agree with that. Tammy, I'm going to give you the flight control so you can take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. I very much appreciate this, and I'm really excited about getting to talk to this audience in particular. So with that, let's get started. When I was just 28 years old, I found myself in the skies over the peninsula of South Korea, essentially operating a crippled flying tank that carried explosives. Not exactly a situation most people find themselves in. So how did I get myself here? Well, as a young Air Force pilot, I was selected to fly the A-10 Warthog. The A-10 is a single-seat attack aircraft, and its primary role is to provide lethal support to our troops on the ground. If our soldiers find themselves under attack and they need help, who do they call in? The A-10s. It carries a multitude of weapons, bombs, missiles, rockets. In fact, the entire aircraft is actually built around a 20-foot gun that holds 1,170 30-millimeter rounds. And the cockpit, it sits in a titanium tub to protect the pilot from enemy fire. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, maybe that's an understatement. And there's probably some of you out there thinking to yourself, that sounds awesome. I want to do that job. Yes, it was awesome, really cool, and very unique. In fact, it is so unique that most people, now maybe not this audience because there's a lot of pilots in this audience, but most people have never actually met a fighter pilot. So more often than not, when I tell people what I did for a living, this is what they say to me. You are a, can you fill in the blank? That'd be nice. This isn't me. This is no joke, the most common thing I hear. You're a badass. Okay, well, that's fun for a few minutes, but let's just bring this back down to reality, because although some of you thought that's really cool, there's probably others of you out there thinking to yourself, well, that sounds cool, but I could never do that job. And instantly, there's a barrier between us. But it is really important to me that we start relating to each other. Because despite the fact that I did a job that society labels as badass, behind all that, I am literally just like everyone else. I just had a different job. I have the same roles: spouse, sibling, parent, friend. I do the same things you do. I cook, I clean, I do laundry. Like I mentioned before, I drive my kids around everywhere in a minivan. That, not so badass. And I even have the same struggles you do. So in order to try and connect even better, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up on the screen a list of things that have been true struggles for me. So I'm going to be very transparent. So here we go. Lack of confidence. That surprises people. Oftentimes I get, but you're a fighter pilot, you lack confidence. Well, I'm human. I just might not admit it as much. I don't know. Fear of failure. Imposter syndrome. You know, thinking to yourself, how did I get here? I don't know if I belong here. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Balancing roles. Perfectionism. That's very prevalent in aviation, and it's not super helpful, actually. Worrying about, oh, what other people think? That one drives me nuts. I don't like that that's something that bothers me, but I know it, so I work on it. Fitting in, speaking up, all these things I'm aware of. Because I'm aware of them, I can work on them. But the question is, if I struggled with all of these things, and yet how could I actually struggle with all of these things and still be successful at a job like fighter pilot? Well, the answer, 100% in my humble opinion, mindset. Mindset is key. And this is the thing. Yes, there are a lot of people that are naturally wired with the mindset to be a great aviator or a great athlete or a great high performer in somewhere else. And they might not understand the need for this kind of training, but it's not you have it or you don't. Mindset is trainable. And in fact, the best way to train it is through mental performance training. The slides decided to stop working. Okay, there we go. Mental performance training. Now, a world-renowned sport and performance psychologist, Dr. Michael Gervais, says that there's 3 things that we can train: our mind, our body, and our craft. And what we're specifically talking about is to train ourselves to the highest levels. So let's talk about those. We're going to go in reverse order. We're going to call craft skill set. So in aviation, skill set is something we constantly train. We're learning the aircraft, we're learning the systems, we're learning how to fly the maneuvers, we're learning airspace, we're learning radio calls, we're doing emergency procedures, tons of skill set training, and that's necessary. But that's not the only thing we need to perform at our best. The second area is our body: sleeping, eating, working out. Now, whether you do those things or not, I don't know, but most people understand that they matter when it comes to performing at your best. But the one area that most people are not actually training is their mind. And elite athletes have discovered that this is the one thing that really sets them apart from everyone else up at those highest levels. And it doesn't matter where you are. Mental performance training, mindset training, training your mind is a level up program. Now, I would venture to guess that flying a Cessna 172 is a little bit more dangerous than playing a game of golf. So if a golfer can benefit from mental performance training and they're investing a significant amount of time and money into it, why wouldn't we as pilots want to do everything we can to be our absolute best? Now, here's the really other cool thing about mental performance training is that it is really good for your mental health. Now, our mental health is kind of a hot topic lately. We're talking about it a lot because, I think we all know why. There's been issues with FAA, and if you go get help, and I'm not going to address that specifically. That's not my area of expertise, but I do want to share a spectrum with you to share what I'm talking about. So you can see here on the left-hand side is mental health crisis. On the right-hand side, you have optimal mind. Well, in the middle, you have mental health support. That looks about right, doesn't it? Now, for a second, I would like you to shift this into the medical model. So let's pretend on the left side it's critically ill, the right side is perfectly healthy, and the middle is go to the doctor. Does that seem right? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't go rushing to the doctor every time something is wrong with me. There's a reason to do that, right? But that's not often what we do. There's other things that we do to take care of ourselves before we go seek professional help. And when I was talking to the Long Beach Police Department a couple of years ago, one thing they said to me was, Tammy, we have very good mental health support. We can be on the phone with the psychologist within a few minutes. And I was really grateful to hear that. But what they said to me was, sometimes we don't need that level of support, but we're not optimal mind. We don't have tools for that spot, that gap right here. And that, in fact, is where mental performance training comes in. If you utilize the tools and techniques taught in mental performance training, and I'm going to say right up front, individually, they're all very simple, but you stack them, very powerful. And you can keep yourself on the right-hand side of the spectrum more often. Now, sometimes we need professional support, and that's fine. But I know I would like to stay on the right side of the spectrum as much as possible. Now, before we move on, I would like you all to think about one thing. I would like you to think to yourself the name of the person that you talk to and listen to the most. Okay, we'll come back to it. If you're tossing between a couple people, just pick one. It will work for the purposes of this exercise. So A little bit more about my background, because people often get quite curious. Who am I and why am I talking about this? I started off my career in the United States Air Force. I went to pilot training back in 1999. And my first assignment was as a T-37 instructor pilot, right out of pilot training. Now, it wasn't the assignment I necessarily wanted, but I loved it. And I grew a lot, and that's where I learned that I loved to teach. Now, this aircraft is actually retired now, and it's replaced by the T-6. But this plane was so much fun to fly, and again, I learned that I loved teaching. After I got done flying the Tweet, I went on to fly the mighty A-10 Warthog. Like I said, it's a single-seat attack aircraft. I flew that in Tucson, Korea, and then back in Tucson. And then in 2006, I had cervical spine reconstruction due to an aircraft injury, and I transitioned to flying the unmanned platforms, both the Predator and the Reaper. I flew that for about 6.5 years. That's also where I went to weapons school in that platform. And I had the very unique opportunity to sit in the United States flying an aircraft in Afghanistan or Iraq, fighting the war, while I was pregnant with my first 2 children. So that's not something everyone can say that they've done. And as you can see, the sensor operator in this photo, she's the one who operates the camera and the laser. She's also pregnant. Just something unique to share. People like to hear that part of the story. But I wanted to teach again in the high G environment, especially in training environment at Laughlin specifically. I went back and I taught in the T-38 as a full-time reservist for 6.5 years. And that's where I had my 3rd child. And I absolutely loved it. And this is actually the time in my career where I realized that I was teaching mental performance training to students and not even recognizing I was doing it. Because a lot of times as instructors, we'll tell people, okay, you need to get over your mistakes. You can't carry that with you. You got to move on. You got to be in the present moment. You got to reframe your failures and learn to make them wins. Don't be a perfectionist. You need to calm yourself down and don't be so anxious. But nobody ever tells you how. Well, don't get me wrong. There's instructors that definitely do that. Piecemeal, right? We're kind of piecemeal sharing that. But you can put all this together in mental performance training, and these skills can be taught to students, and they can grab the tools that they need. In fact, it doesn't just have to be students. It can be anyone who hasn't used these tools before. But this, again, was the time in my life where I discovered that this is a really powerful thing for aviation. So when I retired, I went on and I created Cross-Check Mental Performance Training. This is mental performance training specifically for aviators. If you fly a plane, whether you have or you're in training to fly one, you could have 0 hours, you could have thousands of hours. This training was built for you. It is specifically taken mental performance training that athletes use and shifted it into the aircraft and the aviation world. So that's kind of where I came from and how I got there. So let me share another story. 22 years ago, I am almost done with fighter jet training in the A-10 Warthog when I'm handed a piece of paper, shut in a room with 8 guys and told, you stay in there until you figure this out. Now, I don't need to be quite so dramatic. Those 8 guys, they were just my classmates. But that piece of paper, it mattered. On it, it listed 9 locations from around the globe. It was our assignments as brand new fighter pilots where we would go in our first ever fighter squadron. And some of the locations were awesome. Some of the locations, they were not so awesome. And we had to decide amongst ourselves who was going to get to go to what location. So what do? It's simple. You just play a game of chance and you roll some dice. Of course, isn't that what you would do to figure out where you're going to live next? I hope not. But it is literally what we did. And I rolled Korea. A few months later, I am in Korea, finally scheduled to fly. At this point, it has been over 3 months since I've flown the A-10, and naturally, I am a little bit anxious. But I am so excited to finally be getting back up in the air. Now, one interesting fact about the A-10 is, like I said, it's a single-seat aircraft. But there are no 2-seat training models, which means the first time you fly it, every time you fly it, you're solo. The flight brief goes long, standard, but that doesn't mean I'm given any extra time to meet the scheduled takeoff time. So now I need to rush. And I hate rushing because rushing leads to broken habit patterns, which can lead to switch errors, which in our world can be deadly. Takeoff and departure are smooth and uneventful. But soon, I'm scanning my gauges and I notice that my oil pressure is jumping around. Not normal. So I hop on the radio and I tell my flight lead that my oil pressure is acting strange and that the gauge is all over the place. And he simply replies, "Copy that. Keep an eye on it." Okay. Well, I did keep an eye on it. Such a close eye, in fact, that even before I got a light on my caution panel telling me that I did in fact now have a serious problem with my oil system, I was back on the radio telling my flight lead that I need to shut the engine down. I can hear the tension in his voice because now he knows there's a serious problem. But I'm calm and confident. There's a procedure for this emergency. I know it and I practice it in training. I am not letting myself become circumstance focused and completely consumed inside this problem alone. And I shift my perspective back to the big picture. But how? Well, I do two things. The first thing I do is I change my mission. My mission is no longer to go out and practice maneuvers in the jet. It is simply one thing and one thing only, to land this plane safely. Now, the second thing I do is I apply a technique that we all learn very early on in pilot training. I know you know it too. In fact, when I was learning this as a brand new pilot, I thought this is kind of logical, seems a little bit silly. Why are we memorizing it? But as you know, sometimes you don't have access to all of your brain when you're under stress. So I'm very grateful. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Aviate, fly the plane. Ensure I'm flying at a safe airspeed to keep the aircraft airborne. I'm not going to hit the ground, anything attached to the ground, or another aircraft. Only when that is completely done do I move on to navigate. Navigate. Where am I going? Where's the best place to land for the condition I have? And how can I get my nose pointed there the fastest? Last, communicate. Now, as pilots, we know that things don't always go as planned. And maintaining the proper mindset requires that we be psychologically agile, able to shift focus when circumstances dictate. I open up my checklist and step by step, I apply the procedures. I'm talking my flight lead through everything I'm doing as I do it. I'm taking the left engine and I'm pulling it back to idle. I'm taking the left engine and I'm shutting it down. As a former flight instructor in a different aircraft, I can only imagine how helpless he must feel with a brand new wingman on his wing who hadn't flown in literally months, handling one of the more threatening emergencies you can have in the jet and not being able to do anything about it, but pretty much watch. Well, now I'm flying on just one engine and I need to find a place to land. Kunsan Air Base is closer than my home base of Osan, so we head that direction. I need to be smooth on the controls and watch the airspeed like a hawk. It is vital that I fly smooth enough and fast enough on just this one engine to keep the aircraft airborne. And when thrust on the engine changes, I need to control the yaw. Yawing is essentially one wing flying more forward than the other, hence the aircraft gets slightly canted. If proper rudder pedals are not used to control this yaw, the aircraft can depart controlled flight and spin right into the ground. I maneuver the aircraft carefully and skillfully, and I land safely on the runway at Kunsan Air Base. Later that afternoon, our maintenance team drives down to see if they can figure out what had gone wrong with the jet. And they discover that I had a faulty oil valve. Whew. No switch error for this pilot today, just a bad valve that was leaking out all my oil. Late the following afternoon, they get the jet fixed, I hop in it, and I fly it back to Osan, where I'm greeted by the bros in the squadron with handshakes and even hugs. And comments like, "Awesome job." The last pilot to get into that situation crashed the jet. Now, shutting down an engine in flight, as you all know, is considered a major emergency. Yet everything in that story seemed fairly smooth and uneventful, didn't it? Almost boring. How can something that is considered a major emergency be seen as smooth and uneventful? The answer? Mindset. More often than not, we become circumstance focused and completely consumed inside the problem, which can significantly decrease our overall effectiveness. or make us completely ineffective and essentially frozen. So what is the point here? The point here is that preparation is key to include your mindset. Do you think I got in the jet that day expecting to shut down an engine? No, I did not expect that, but I had prepared for it. In military flying, we brief the planned mission thoroughly, but we also always cover contingencies or the most likely what if scenarios. Like, what if I have to shut an engine down in flight? What if I have to eject into enemy territory? What if weather rolls in over my target area? But you don't have to be in a high performance fighter jet in order to prepare for the unexpected. Preparation applies to all aspects of aviation. It applies to life. So I want you to think about it for yourself right in this moment. If you're a pilot who flies a plane, are you truly prepared for the most likely what ifs in your aviation journey? Have you thought through in detail, step by step, what you would do as if it's actually happening, all the way through to the end, to include how you want to think, feel, and respond under those challenging circumstances? Now, sometimes people say to me, well, how do I know what those what ifs are? Well, it can be fairly easy. When you lay in bed at night and you think, what if this happens? What if that happens? That's where you can start. Have you thought through in detail, again, all the way through, as if it's happening, what you would do in that scenario to include how you want to think, feel, and respond under those circumstances? Or are you just hoping that thing doesn't happen to you? Because hope, it's a powerful thing and we need it. But hope, it's not a plan. When we fail to prepare for the most likely what if scenarios, we can very easily become circumstance focused and completely consumed inside the problem alone, which can stall or stop our progress. Do you think that I was grateful that the military required me to plan and train for the unexpected? Truth? Not at first. When I was a young pilot, I really didn't understand why we spent so much time on all these emergency procedures, and some of them were really obscure, when I couldn't even land the plane yet. But I am oh so grateful for the wisdom of the Air Force to train me that way. Never underestimate the power of preparation to include your mindset, how you want to think, feel, and respond. Okay, now we're going to go back to the question I asked you earlier. So I asked you to think about the name of the person that you talk to and listen to the most. Now I realize I can't actually interact with you, but I want you to think to yourself, did anyone say yourself? You. There's probably some people out there that did. But I want you to think about this. You may or may not talk to yourself out loud, but you are having a conversation inside of your head all day long. You are talking to yourself, and guess what? You are listening to yourself. And what you say to yourself, as much as we might want to deny it, because I used to be that person, it really matters. It makes a big difference. So really pay attention to what it is that you're saying to yourself. All right, I'm going to put a very busy slide up here. And again, if I was actually had a live audience, we'd kind of go back and forth, but we can still work this out. So as you're sitting there watching, I want you to look at this slide, and I want you to find as many red things as you can. Start listing them in your head, kind of noting them. So if I were to ask you a question, you'd be ready. Okay, here we go. All right, so again, if I was interacting with you, then I would call on someone, and that person would say, I'm ready to go. And I'd say, okay, I want you to tell all of us, I want you to list off as many yellow things as you can. And this is usually the point where two things happen. One, the person's like, oh, that was a trick. Or two, they start, beach ball, sail, I don't know, trying to list things off. But the point is not to get list a bunch of things correctly. The point is, let's talk about how our brain works, because it matters. So our brain is amazing. but it cannot take in everything that's coming at it. It just can't. So it filters things out. And in this case, we're very consciously filtering. We're choosing to focus on the red so that when Tammy asks me all these red things, I get the most right, because especially in aviation, we're super focused and like we want to perform the best. Then Tammy tricks you and says yellow, and you're like, what? That's not fair. But the other thing that happens with our brain and the way it filters is it's going to filter based on what you believe. So, for example, let's just use a child who thinks they're bad at math. So their end state is, I'm bad at math. Okay, well, your brain will use this data to filter in what it's bringing into your brain. It's going to grab all the data that validates, in fact, that is the end state, because that's what it believes, right? So we're going to validate that we're bad at math. So your brain is letting in, or their brain is letting in every situation where they're bad at math or anything that validates they could be bad at math, etc. And it's filtering out where they're doing good. Now, some of it still may sneak through, but for the most part, we're not getting the data that's accurate. We're getting based on what we believe. So that's why it matters what you believe. So let's say you're the person out there who says, I love to fly, but I can't land. Now this person believes I can't land. So guess what? You're going to see all the data. You're going to filter in all the data that in fact validates that, yeah, you can't land and maybe you shouldn't be a pilot and all these things all along the way. When your instructor's like, hey, you're doing fine. And you're like, no, I suck. It's very interesting. So it really matters what you believe. And that's just one small example. So let me share another story with you. When I was teaching in the T-38, so that's this aircraft right here, teaching the T-38, again, the last 6.5 years of my career. At this point, I've been teaching for a long time and I love it. I've already been to weapons school where they teach us a lot about how to teach. And I just can't, it's my favorite thing to do. So here I am teaching. I show up one morning to brief for the student. He's sitting at my desk. I'm standing. We got our whiteboard and here's our mission. Here's our objectives for this mission. And here's the plan. And I'm briefing him. And while I'm briefing him, what I'm doing, and I do this with every student, is I observe the student. I have already seen his grade book, but his grade book is not going to fly. He is going to fly. So I'm paying attention to him and kind of what's going on with him. Where is he emotionally? Where is he mentally? So I can be the best instructor I can possibly be. Because I truly believe that as an instructor, it is my job to modify my instructional style based on the needs of the student. I do not expect the student to modify how they learn based on how I teach. And I see that a little bit too much. Now, obviously, when you're a new instructor, that might be the case, but we have to expand our toolbox and keep trying to be better. As instructors, we need to be like detectives. Like it's our job to figure out what's the problem, what is the root cause of the problem, so we can actually give an instructional fix that makes the problem better. We're not just saying, oh, you need to flare more. Like, why are they not, like, what's the problem with the flare? Are they not looking at the right place? Do they not understand the feel of the stick? Like, whatever it is, but it's your job to figure that out. So anyways, I spend a lot of time individually instructing each student because everyone's different. This particular day, I can see that this student, he looks like he has the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's just like, ugh. I thought, okay, he's answering my questions. He's responding. It was nothing like, let's not go fly, but I just was paying attention to him. Now, don't get me wrong. U.S. Air Force pilot training at the time was a year long, very intense. And sure, it's still intense, but it's just a little bit different. That's why I'm saying that. So it's a year-long program at this point, and it is very intense. And there's a lot of weight on their shoulders, but that's usually counterbalanced by the cool jet they're getting to fly and the fun things they're getting to do. But today just didn't seem that way. Anyways, we go out, we get our tail number, we get in the jet, start it, take off. We're on departure, flying out to the area, and I can very quickly see that he's a good pilot. He has skills, but he is not seeing it. Not at all. So I decide that my role on this particular flight is to be his confidence coach. I'm not saying backseat cheerleader. I'm not saying, oh yeah, I'm going to say good job on everything just because everybody gets a trophy. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I need to build his confidence because that's what he's lacking right now. I can see he has skills, but his confidence is impacting his skills. So let's get his confidence up. So I wanted to make sure he did not fail this flight. Now, he's still a ways from going solo. Knowing that is key information, right? Like if he was just about to go solo, that would be a different story. He's well away from soloing. So I wanted him to believe he can do this. I want him to see it. So, we're at the bottom of the loop at 100 or 450 knots. If he pulls too fast, we're going to over-G the aircraft. He's going to fail and we have to go back to maintenance. So we're, working through that, making sure he's getting lots of instruction just to get through that. And then, he's flying around that invisible box in the sky, right? We're trying to stay in the area using these new nav aids that he's not used to. He's about to bust out. Okay, let's turn right to it. Let's head north right now so we don't bust out of the area. We get back for a landing. He's going fast, which is normal, right? It's T-38. He pulls the power because he's like, whoa, this is way too fast. Well, if we do nothing, we're literally going to crash. So I take the plane, we go around and we talk through it again and we land, just trying to work him through like, you can do this. So we go back into the building to do the debrief. And I started like we always do. This is our mission. These are our objectives. This is the plan. Now, before I get into the specifics of the debrief, I ask him a question that I don't normally ask, but each student is different. I say to him, how are you doing? And he looked up at me like I had 3 eyeballs. And this was a trick question. And he just sat there like, this is fighter jet training. Nobody asked, how are you? And he just sat there and not surprised. Finally, I just looked at him and said, here's the deal. I am picking up feelings of defeat. And instantly he went like this. Yeah, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I didn't have any trouble landing the T-6, but I can't land the T-38. And instantly I was relieved. I explained to this young man, the T-38 is one of the most difficult aircraft in the entire Air Force inventory to land. It has tiny little wings, tiny little gear. It lands at speeds upwards of 165, 175 knots. It just takes time. And I have seen nothing in his training at this point that tells me that I say this to him, I said, I have seen nothing in your training so far, in your grade book or anything you've done today that tells me that you can't be where you need to be by the time you need to be there. And he took that information. I didn't do anything. Like he changed. He just listened and believed me. Now, sometimes our belief in ourselves, it has to start with someone else. Eventually, we need to have our own belief. But before you've proven it to yourself, if somebody else believes in you, take it and run. Somebody that you trust, somebody that has credibility, take it, go with it, use it. Now that's what he did. I told him, you can do this. I identified that his confidence wasn't there. He didn't believe it. This is the thing though, and this is what's really important for us as those of you who are instructors, or I mean, even anyone out there. I could have debriefed him for an hour plus 2 hours, probably on all the things that he did wrong, and given him instructional fixes on all these things. But I don't think it would have helped because these were just the problems that were showing up. There was a root cause that was deeper than that. It's really important that we get to the root cause because 2 students can do the same thing on the outside, but they have 2 completely different causes. We have to know what that is. And in this case, it was his mindset. It is so extremely powerful. He didn't think that he could. So like we talked about with that picture that I asked with the yellow and the red, he didn't think he could land the T-38. So he was seeing mistakes everywhere, not just landings, but his whole departure and how he turned into the area and, his airspeed control. Like he was just beating himself up instead of seeing his potential. And that matters. What you think, it matters. So, okay, let's go to that next slide that I clicked through earlier. I've alluded this already, but who is mental performance training for? Mental performance training really is for anyone. My particular course, a pilot, or if you're a student pilot, or you're going to go to pilot training, it's for you. I have had 0-hour students take it. I have had 30,000-hour instructor pilots take it, and they all get results if you've never done this kind of training. Because this stuff is trainable. Confidence is trainable. Focus is trainable. We can work on anxiety. We can work on perfectionism. So one of the things I want to share is one much shorter story. When I was creating my course, I actually interviewed people, and I wanted to make sure that I was addressing what was really needing to be addressed. And so I asked these two particular pilots what was the biggest mistake they'd ever made in an aircraft. And student A says to me, oh, well, kind of hemmed and hawed, and they go, I had a tail strike. It was so bad. I know tail strikes are so bad. I can't believe I even did it. I mean, maybe I sometimes I wonder if I should even still be flying. I mean, and they went on and on and on about this tail strike. Pilot B, this pilot says to me, well, yeah, well, I had a tail strike once, but I learned that when I do X, Y happens. So I don't do X anymore. Now, this may seem very simple, but I want you to pay attention. Pilot A was letting their mistake define them. Pilot B was letting their mistake inform them. That's all mistakes are. They're information. And we take them. That's why we debrief. That's why we should all debrief as pilots. Because you can't correct anything if you don't identify the problem and you can't work on it. So that's just a framing thing. That's one minor example of how this can be. But I do want to offer one other tool before we move on and get to the question section, because I know I've talked a lot about why this matters. And as you can see, I'm very passionate about it. Again, it's not a you have it or you don't. And some people are wired naturally to be like, who needs that? But most people are not. And there's people who are wired in a way that they don't think they need it, but then something happens in their personal life. Maybe they have an emergency in the aircraft and something shifts in them. They're like, oh, I've never felt like this before. What do I do? It's good for that kind of thing. But I want to give you a tool to actually two tools. One is very simple and one is probably something you haven't thought about. First, the really simple tool that I like to teach in my class. I have a way to help people refocus when they get kind of like, oh, maybe you made a mistake, maybe the radios were busy, something happened that got you lacking focus. And you know you need to get back on it. You know you need to be in the moment, but how do you do that? Like your instructor might tell you to do it, but they don't tell you how. Now I have a more advanced technique I teach in the class, but for right now, the quickest thing I can tell you is actually say out loud, what now? What now? Because it puts the word now puts your brain in the moment, because you don't want to be in the past. You don't want to be going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I'm such an idiot. See, there's that dialogue right inside your head that we don't need. Not good for you. Then you don't want to be going and be in the future going, what if I do that again? What if I fail this? What if I? You're not in the moment where you're flying the plane. So what now is a quick way to bring yourself back. Again, almost too simplistic, right? You're like, oh, this is common sense. It might seem like common sense, but you have to think about it on the ground. So when you get in the air, you actually do it. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is goals. Now, I'm not talking about like, I want to be, an airline pilot, or I want to, not that. I'm not talking about that. But that does play in. But what I'm going to want to talk about is there's outcome-based goals and there's process-based goals. Now, most people specifically pilots, we only focus on outcome-based goals. We're getting the next flight done. We're getting the next check ride done. We're getting the next certificate. We're getting we always like cruise through the thing so fast. We're already at the next thing. Those are outcome goals that we have. Now I'm going to take this out of aviation for a second. My daughter is a runner. She's a cross-country runner. Let's say she has a goal of running 5K in under 20 minutes. Okay. She does all the work. And then she gets to the race and she runs a 20:02. Is she a failure? No, she's not a failure. But if that is the only goal she set, she will absolutely feel that way. And it will take some serious grit to keep on going, right? But if we set up process goals to kind of keep you afloat along the way, it's helpful. So for her, what she would do is every day she'd have a checklist that said, okay, I slept for 8 hours. I ate breakfast. I ate lunch. I ate dinner. I took my supplements. I showed up to practice. I worked hard at practice. I did 3 visualizations of my race. I had some relaxing time. And she checks a box, or even stickers. I know that sounds very elementary, but our brains love it. She'll fill those out. And so if she doesn't meet her goal, she can look back and go, you know what? I did the work. I'm going to get there next time. And it's so much easier. We can do that in aviation as well. we can set those goals, but I'm going to study for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. I'm going to, every time I get weathered out, I'm going to spend 30 minutes talking to pilots around asking them questions about, what's the biggest, struggle you've had in aviation? What do you wish you knew? There's all sorts of things that you can create as part of your process to get you to the goal. It's all the things that you do anyways, but you want to make sure you're recognizing those things along the way. So anyways, this stuff is for anyone. I'm going to share quickly about my course in case you are interested. I don't care where you do this training, find some books. You read books on athletic training, mental performance. It doesn't matter. If you want it shifted into the aviation world, come take my course. It's 4 modules. It can be 4 weeks if you do it that quickly, but it's 4 modules, 45 to 60 minutes of pre-recorded videos of me teaching that you can watch on demand whenever you want. There's aviation-specific mental performance tools, so behavioral changes that you make throughout each week. And then there's practical study and flight prep strategies. And each week we have live Zoom calls, which is where a lot of this power comes in, because people realize they're not alone in this journey. Oh, you felt like that too? It's just phenomenal. So anyways, if you're interested in that, this is my last slide, and then we'll do questions. This is the community we created. It's an online community. It's called school.com, and my particular community is Crosscheck. And the reason we created this is because I wanted a place for people who maybe can't afford the class to come and at least be exposed to this content. So you can get in the community for free and be part of the discussion board. If you want to take the class, the mental performance training for aviators class, you'll have to upgrade to premium, which is $97 a month, but you get access to the entire class. You get access to our discussion groups. We're going to do some emergency procedure training. There's lots of things that come with it. But what I will tell you is when you go to this website, you have to create a profile. Like you have to say, oh, this is my name and this is my password and whatever. After you do that, it's going to pop up on my side. One of my team members or I will allow you in. We have to accept you in there. It will tell you to create a profile. Don't let that scare you. Okay, you don't need to put a picture. You need to use a real name. If this makes you uncomfortable, some people want to put I'm a pilot with 3,000 hours. I'm a CFI. You don't have to just make it simple, but don't let that stop you from joining us. And with that, Karen, let's do questions.
Thank you, Tammy. Just awesome presentation. Makes me pretty excited to get onto your program. Hey, we have a question, actually multiple questions from Chuck. So Chuck is pretty enthused. So first one, this is a great program for CFIs. How often is this topic brought up in day-to-day training?
I don't know. When we teach it, we're talking about this all the time. I don't know as far as like CFIs, what they talk about. I know for sure that there's some CFIs out there like me that you're teaching it and you don't even realize you're teaching these concepts. But if you can have the tools, it's like one of the reasons this course exists, not just to help the student pilots or, like anybody wherever they're, but part of my goal is to be a partner with CFIs out there who have maybe students that are like, oh man, my student could use this. I'm not expecting you to take this class and then try and teach it. I would think send them to me. So when they come to you, they are more prepared, they're more mentally prepared, and they're ready to fly. And you don't have to worry about teaching them this stuff because you're right, Chuck, this stuff's important. And a lot of instructors are already teaching it, but it's really not taught specifically that I know of. I mean, it's here and there in lots of programs, but it's not in a place that I know that's all together. That being said, I want to share that we are creating a CFI course to teach you all the things they don't teach you in CFI school. It's going to be a 12-week course and we're only letting 10 people in. So if you happen to be interested in joining us, that's going to start, we're hoping April. For real, I know I've been talking about this for a while. If you know me, it's actually happening. So if you get in the school community, message me on school and say, hey, I'm interested.
And I would agree with you, Tammy, that we really don't see this elsewhere in the community as a topic that is being taught. And as you noted earlier, as CFIs themselves become more experienced, they pick up their own tips, techniques, tools in the NAFI community. We offer the mentorship, the support, a lot of networking where people discuss these kinds of things one-on-one. But as far as an integrated training program, which you're offering, I don't think we tend to do that in our community, unfortunately. So I'm really glad you're opening up the opportunity. And I think we also have the question for Chuck's second question, is this available somewhere for students too?
Yeah. In fact, like I said, you just go to that thisschool.com/crosscheck, and you don't have to, you don't have to show a certificate or anything. And if you're learning, you can take this class. And one of the things I think is really important, and why we don't hear about this, and I'm kind of over this, is we think about pilot and confidence go together. We all agree on that. Okay. But this is the thing. Confidence is it's not static. It doesn't always stay the same. It can go up, but it can also go down. And what happens sometimes is when people's confidence goes down because maybe something happened in aircraft, maybe their life outside of flying is overwhelming, maybe they can't study as much as they'd like to, and their confidence starts to decrease, they start to think, oh, I'm not a pilot. Well, that's not the case. Like, you can work on your confidence. It's trainable. It is something you can work on, and it's so very important.
Now, if we just look back, Tammy, some of the things that you had a slide on earlier in your presentation where you said you had these aspects, perspectives at various times, things like the imposter syndrome. So do you have any specific tips or ideas for someone? Because we can identify these things in the students. All of a sudden you say, well, that was a great landing. And it's like, well, that was just lucky.
Oh, you mean when the student says it's just lucky?
Yeah, or they can hardly believe where they are. They have that imposter syndrome. It can happen at any stage of training.
Well, I mean, I think there's different techniques depending on the student, but one of the biggest things I like to do is I like to share with them, like, hey, do you trust me? Do you believe in my credibility? Do you think I deserve to be here instructing you? Oh, yeah. Okay, well then, when I tell you that you're doing really well, then if you don't believe that, then you're not trusting me. Like, part of this process is to trust me, right? And that's when I said some of the belief has to come from other people at first. Now, that's not going to hold water forever, right? I mean, some of it is just helping them change the dialogue in their head, literally asking them, what are you thinking? Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't land this plane. Okay, well, let's go find let's do some landings where you are doing well, and let's change the dialogue. Because I'm sure that if you think they can, right? And we just have to get them to believe that differently, because they're putting too much energy and emphasis on the negative, which is very common. If you can help them identify that alone can be helpful.
In fact, I always thought it's interesting because you see polar opposites when you're instructing for a while. You'll have the person where you literally have to tell them you're not as good as you think you are, and the person that you tell them you're better than you think you are.
Yes.
Another one was perfectionism, which is really so common amongst pilots. So as an instructor, when you have someone that's just hung up on that perfectionism, and that's really either creating a plateau or they can't get beyond that. How do you combat that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important that we as instructors are real with them. And meaning, like I like to say to every student, there's no perfect flight. And a lot of instructors say something similar. There's no perfect flight. And the only difference between you and me is how many mistakes you make and how big they are. I make them too. When I'm flying the plane and I make a mistake, guess what? I am going to share it. Because if you as an instructor try and hide your mistakes because you shouldn't make them, you're losing credibility. If they see you make a mistake and you just own it and fix it and you handle it calmly as you should, and then you actually handle the aircraft and you fix it, then they go, oh, that's normal. That's one of the first ways to do it. The second way is you give them parameters. Like, for example, if you have a student try and hold on altitude exactly, they're going to struggle, right? Because they're going to focus so much on their altitude that other things are going to get out of their cross check. Like, they're going to be so focused on this altitude that their airspeed is going to go out of control. Their heading's going to, it's too much. So you give them a parameter, right? You say, okay, let's do plus or minus 10 knots or whatever is relevant for your aircraft. And so they don't have to focus so much on that, and highlight to them that is us not being perfect. And if you have them try and be perfect, you can have them see how their cross check starts to be terrible. And it actually makes a bad pilot, right? So, I mean, we like to say the 80%, and when it comes to like decision making, right? A lot of times people, when they're flying, they want to defer to the instructor because the instructor knows the answer. Let's say you're in the area and the instructor's like, okay, do some maneuvers. And they're like, oh, well, what do I do? You as the instructor want to see them just make a decision, right? We want to see that they can make a decision without us. And we have to teach them the 80% solution now is better than 100% never. So make a decision showing that you'll make one and, not trying to be perfect. And then we can fix it later from what isn't perfect,
That's true. I think one of the issues with perfectionism that we see sometimes also is that people don't want to accept, somehow they think they're born with wings and they're immediately justifying things that aren't right. They'll just say there's always some reason. Oh, it was too hot, too cold, whatever. And they can't get beyond that justification to take it as a learning experience. And isn't that the important key, is say we all make mistakes, but you have to learn from it. And if you can't try to justify that it was some external cause other than the opportunity to learn to be better, you won't learn.
Well, it's funny because I think that if you have a student that's doing that, or maybe you're a pilot who recognizes you do kind of justify everything, it's not to say that there weren't external factors that impacted it, but you can always find something that you can do better. Even if you were only 1% of the problem, be humble enough to go, okay, how could I have made that better? How did I contribute to not getting, it perfect or whatever? And speaking of perfect, what I like to say is strive for perfection, but don't be a perfectionist. Meaning, I don't want you to lower your standards because I'm telling you can't be perfect. I want you to shoot for that high standard. Just know that on the backside, there's going to be something that's not quite perfect, and go, okay, let's be curious about that. You want to be curious. That's key in all of this, is just curiosity. Like, what caused that? How can I make it better? Instead of like, oh, I didn't do that. It was the weather,
Mm-hmm. I think one of the key things you mentioned, even when you were talking about setting goals for your daughter, was visualization. One of the things I find as a pilot examiner is everyone knows, say private pilot, they know they're going to get the simulated engine failure. It is absolutely a given during their exam. And you'd be surprised how many people mismanage that, even though they've obviously done it quite a number of times. I don't know if it's because they don't expect it to be exactly the way they train for it, but so many times they just stop thinking. And
yeah.
What do you do with someone? How do you tell someone to get beyond that? Do they need more visualization? Or I think the what now you mentioned is an excellent idea. Get themselves back in the now. What do you do now?
Yeah, sometimes people are thinking too far out, but going to the visualization piece of it, I kind of think of, there's chair flying and there's visualization, and they can be combined, but I see them differently. So I see chair flying more as like procedural processes, steps, that kind of aspect. The visualization piece of it, like I said, it can be combined, but visualization is very much, you're actually picturing you're there. You're trying to use as many senses as you can to make it real, because if your brain doesn't know the difference between you being there and you visualizing you're there. So that's why it's so important to visualize, how you want it to be. What I found when I was a student was that the instructor would say to me, hey, okay, go chair fly that. And I was like, chair fly? You said that like I should know what it is, but I don't know what it is. So I'm going to walk away and pretend I know what it is. And I'm going to sit down in a chair with my helmet and my plunger and a fake cockpit. And I'm going to chair fly. I wasn't very good at it. I would find myself I was all over the place. I'd be on departure. Then I'm like, wait, I didn't raise the gear. Oh no. And so when I came back as an instructor, I remembered that feeling. And I thought, you know what, all these students they're not taught how to chair fly. I know that sounds kind of crazy to some people, but there's multiple ways to chair fly, but we should at least teach students a way. I personally use a very methodical method that starts on paper. It's actually if you go to my school community and you sign up for premium, you have access to my chair flying class as well. It's very detailed, and it can help students with exactly what you're talking about. That's single engine, because it gets things in their mind in order versus just kind of, I know I need to do this, but what triggers you to do that? There's processes, right?
Okay, thank you. We are at the top of the hour, but we have 3 more questions if we can keep them brief. All right. One is, and I think the answer is going to be your upcoming CFI program. How can we add this to a CFI training curriculum? And by extension, obviously, that flows through to our students.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief. So I believe that every pilot, if you have interested in this topic at all, come in the community and just sign up for a month. You can cancel at any time, but sign up for premium and take the class. Take that one first. And then the CFI one is just an advanced, like taking it to the next level. But having this, my basic course, will help anyone. I've had a lot of instructors take it, and it's helping them interact with their students because it gets them thinking differently.
Okay. Kimmery asked, how do we register? But I believe you already told us, use the QR code, and that we get to cross-check, and then you'll find a place to sign up. But she asked specifically, what is the cost of your course?
Yeah, so if you go to this community, and once you're inside, you can't sign up for the premium membership right away. Well, you have to get in, and then once you're in the community, across the top, it'll say Classroom. Click on Classroom, and you'll see it'll be locked initially. It has a little lock symbol over it. It says like Mental Performance for Aviators course or something like that. Click on that. It will allow you to upgrade to premium. It's $97 a month, and you can cancel it at any time you want. That gets you access to the entire course. It's drip release, so one module a week, and it will also get you access to our weekly discussion groups, which you can just sit and listen. You don't have to come prepared with anything, but there's a lot of learning that happens there. It's really cool.
Okay, I see we have some more questions that have come in. So at this point, I'm going to say, for those of you that would like to stay maybe we can get through some in 5 minutes, okay? Because I think this is really, really valuable for everyone. So hang on there, we're getting close to the end. Okay, so from Andy, he said, what now? Process goals, that is. If you can glean his meaning.
Not exactly sure, but I mean, those are the two things I kind of taught, using what now to bring your brain to the present moment, and then using process-based goals to help build yourself as you go along, because too many of us slide backwards when we only have that one goal and we don't meet it. Then we're like, oh, I shouldn't be a pilot. Like, we slide all the way back instead of having hey, I did the work, I can just try again,
Right. We have one from Ed, and Ed, hang in there. As a student about to give up, I wish my instructors had watched this. Ed, you may need to look for another instructor, okay? You need a match.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in the Air Force, we would typically fly with a student 3 times, and they'd go with another instructor for a couple times. And I am not always the best fit for a student. And if I'm not, we'd find someone else. And I don't take it personal. And I think most instructors should feel that way as well. Like, just don't take it personally if it doesn't work out for you and your student. And students, see if you can find another one if it's just not a good fit. Now, don't obviously keep blaming them. We don't want to, and Ed, that's not what I'm saying you're doing, Ed, but there's some people that do that. So, but yeah, find a great instructor. There's so many out there.
Remember, you can interview instructors before you ever start lessons. A lot of people don't really realize that, because remember, it's not a balance of power where they're godlike and you have to bow to their wishes. Remember, you're paying the bills. What about a case where very, very specific, the student that has been built up with some confidence, and then their father undermines their confidence? How do you deal with that if they're not getting the support at home?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of techniques I'm going to teach inside the class, because sometimes, our confidence does get ripped away from us, and we have to have a way of building it ourselves. And a lot of times it literally simply comes from recognizing our milestones. The smallest thing, it doesn't have to be a big party. It just has to be whether you write it down in your logbook, like your journal, but you don't have to have a journal. You just have a little tiny notebook. These were my 3 wins today. I can do this. Just anything that makes you see that you can, because you don't want to get yourself stuck because if one person says one thing. Like, as simple as when I was like 10, my sister said, you can't sing. And I didn't sing again for like 15 years because one person said. And I'm not saying I'm a great singer, but it can be that powerful. So the fact that he's recognizing this is happening, that's first of all huge. I say self-awareness is a superpower. So if you know what's going on, how it's impacting you, you have the power to change how you're thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Brian asked if you have any tips for students who experience severe check ride anxiety.
Oh, that's so common.
Agreed. I did on my private pilot. I was a wreck.
Yeah, well, sometimes I think some of it comes from they're going to ask me a question and I'm not going to know the answer, or I'm not going to, you know, and a lot of people don't know their publications like they should. And I think this takes a huge stress off of people. If you cannot know everything at every moment. You just can't. I mean, I know there's pilots out there say know everything inside all these books. And that's great. I wish I could, but I can't. But if you know what's in each regulation, where you can find it, when you know when DPE asks you that question, you can go, well, I don't know the answer, but I know I can find it in this pub in this chapter. That's one thing that I can help, that actually, because you know where to look, it releases a lot of your brain and gives you more access. Because sometimes it's not that you don't know it, it's access to it. Picture an arena full of people, and when they let the concert out, they only open 2 doors. Like sometimes that's the access to the data in our brain, like 2 doors, and the data is in the back of the arena. Like you want to open all the doors. So sometimes the problem is not that you don't know, it's just that you're freezing. So there's some techniques like breathing. I know that sounds so simplistic again, but a lot of people are holding their breath. Like when you take a breath, you can actually increase your focus and calm yourself down. Like it's okay to be nervous. Like in fact, the biological responses to that, you know, that check ride, just think about it. The same biological responses to nerve are the same as excitement. Sweaty hands, you get sick to your stomach, you have to go to the bathroom. But the same thing happens when you're excited too. So are you telling yourself you're nervous, or why don't you start telling yourself you're excited? Even if you don't believe it, start saying it, because your body is giving you all that stuff because it matters to you. Those things matter. That's why you're feeling it. You're like, oh, because your body's like, this is important. So I'm going to give you adrenaline. I'm going to give you, use it. It's there to help you. It increases your focus.
And remember on the exams, it's not a case where one item you're not familiar with is oh my God, you're unsuccessful. That's not the case at all. In fact, the examiner is going to want to know that you know how to look things up, and you can do that successfully. So, you know, that extra 2 hours of study saying, oh, if I only had gotten up at 3 o'clock in the morning instead of 5 o'clock in the morning, I would. No, it doesn't matter. You know it by then. Get a good night's sleep. And if you have any chance, if your students have check ride anxiety, have them talk to the examiner prior. Okay, because that'd be really calming. Examiners, we're all human. We were all there just like you all were, working our way through the ratings, sweating things, you know, bouncing landings. You know, we were all there. It's just, you know, you don't have to be perfect. No one expects you to be perfect. You just need to show you're safe.
And that's coming from a DPE. You should answer that question. Good job.
Okay. And Jasmine, thank you so much. She's basically passing on a compliment that she's saying teaching about training your mind is incredibly important, and it seems almost taboo to talk about mental health. By the way, that is changing. How can I, as a CFI and a pilot, help to create an environment where talking and teaching about training your mind is encouraged?
Yeah. Well, I think that just caring about your student and what they're thinking. So I'll tell you that when I would come back from an instructional flight and go into our squadron bar or heritage room with the other instructors before we go debrief our students, I would overhear them saying, oh, I can't believe that so-and-so did this, and I can't believe it. And I'd stop and go, hey, did you ask them what they were thinking? And they go, I don't care what they're thinking. They did it wrong. And I'm like, no. It matters what they're thinking. Because if you don't know what they're thinking, you don't know why they did that. I mean, yeah, they did it wrong, fine. But again, we're getting to the root cause. I think there's a lot to be said about an instructor, and there's tons of instructors out there who really care. So just ask him, hey, what's going through your mind at this point? And letting them know so they can share that with you and feel comfortable with it. And if you have either studied mental performance in a book or somewhere else, or you take my course, you can more easily identify what's going on and maybe how you can help them.
Yeah, and concrete things you can do, and obviously already just from the great ideas that Tammy shared tonight, start using those. Start talking about this with other instructors or other students, because students can ask for this from their instructor too. This is archived. Invite other people to watch this. You know, have a ripple effect. You know, everyone watching, you could introduce it to 10 more people and really start the community and, you know, really share this very valuable information. Okay, well, thank you everyone for hanging in there, and Tammy so much. We have a couple more slides because we also want you to save the date for next month. So again, Tammy, I think you'll probably have more people joining your community. Thank you for sharing the QR code and for such valuable information. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about this type of training where it fits very appropriately into flight instruction and day-to-day flying. Thank you. Okay, and for our audience, save your date for next month. If I can get to the next slide. Here we go. So next month, we'll have Mark King, CFI. He is an excellent, highly respected upset and aerobatic trainer. People, they keep asking him to come back to MentorLIVE, and he is. So he's going to standardize roll recovery and general aviation. So a very key safety aspect. So mark your calendar for next month's MentorLIVE. And once again, thank you to Pilot Institute for sponsoring this very valuable episode. Look for them at air shows, and remember they have a great VOR simulator. And after this program ends, remember you can take your wings credit right away and consider joining our NAFI community as a member. You have access to a lot more valuable content, including member-only courses as well. Consider donating, help us soar, and remember you have 100 prior archived MentorLIVE broadcasts as well as this one. So thank you everyone for joining us, and fly safely.
Instructors, are you tired of students showing up unprepared? With Pilot Institute Online Ground School, they show up ready. No more unpaid ground lessons that run long. No more frustrated students blaming you for the slow progress. Instead, you get students who learn quickly, recommend you to friends, and also make your job easier. The result? You build flight hours faster, your students are going to succeed, and then also you get to focus on the flying. With a 99.9% pass rate and 33,000 five-star reviews, we are the ground school that instructors trust. Plus, it's completely free for CFIs. Get your free instructor account today at pilotinstitute.com/instructor.